So, Brent, let's start with you. Half of the crowd, or maybe even a quarter, only heard the milkshake theory that you have, and explain it in 35 seconds or less.
Okay, so the milkshake theory is the fact that the dollar is an extremely flawed currency, except for all the other currencies, with the exception of gold, are even worse than the dollar. And as the U.S. raises interest rates, it sucks in capital from around the world, pushing U.S. asset prices higher, which allows the Fed to keep raising, which makes a benign circle within the United States and a terrifying circle outside the United States, which ends very, very badly, but not yet.
Doug, you like milkshakes. Is that a milkshake theory you like?
No, that's logical. I mean, I wouldn't argue with that. But I'm the wrong person to ask about that because I've always been interested in history. The problem is that first thing I wanted to be when I was a kid was a paleontologist. So when you're looking at history that goes back hundreds of millions of years, it sometimes warps your perspective. Now, keeping that in mind, this is why I've always had a tendency to be not just a bear, but a perma-bear. And I'm kind of looking forward to the collapse of civilization.
And on that note, Grant, where do you see the U.S. dollar over the next 12 months relative to the other currencies and gold?
Well, I think for those of you that haven't seen Brent's presentation, it's phenomenal, and it makes all the sense in the world. I disagree with a lot of it, but it makes me think, and it makes me challenge my own assumptions. You know, the Brent's case, and if I get this wrong, jump in. Essentially, the reason the dollar's going to go a lot higher is effectively it's a big short squeeze. There aren't enough of them in the world to satisfy demand. People that need to pay back trillions of dollars of borrowing around the world that they've all taken out during this period of low interest rates. I think that's all true. I think Brent's absolutely right about all of that, except the fact that when this starts to happen, the pain that this will cause around the world is so great that something will have to be done very quickly. We've seen the Plaza Accord, we've seen the supposed Shanghai Accord when this started to get out of line. And I think if what Brent lays out as the future begins to happen, the central banks will be forced to step in and squash this because it will ripple right across the globe and cause chaos. So I think Brent's absolutely right up until the point when the damage gets done, and I think it'll get stopped because it has to.
So let's push with this because this is a resource conference. You know, is there even a dividend-producing stock at this conference? Sprott Inc. I heard that dividend isn't really I'm just kidding. I love Rick. But if a stronger U.S. dollar, Grant, what does that do moving forward to the price of gold?
Well, I think it depends, because if the dollar suddenly spikes because you get some kind of problem around the world, the dollar and gold could go up. And I think Brent's been one of the most eloquent people explaining why you need to own dollars and gold, which is very counterintuitive. But if Brent's right and the dollar bulls are right, you're going to want to own both of them because they're both going to go screaming high.
Okay, what happens if, let's just say, U.S. dollar just stays humming and high? What happens to gold?
Honestly, I don't care. I don't look at the gold price. I don't care.
I know,
but this is a real
prices,
point. This is a real point. The difference between gold being at 1,100 and 1,300 or 1,400, it makes no difference to me. I want to own gold because over the next 10 years, it's going to do what I need it to do. And I don't sweat $100 here or there, and I don't pay attention to the charts and is it going to break this, is it going to go $25 lower? I genuinely don't care.
But over the last 7 years, it's been a horrible place to be.
Well, it depends. If you bought at 1900, yeah, it's been a terrible place to be. If you've been buying it since 200, it doesn't matter. I mean, it really, depending on your entry price, it's a correction or a crash.
Okay. What about silver, in your opinion, Grant?
Silver, I see a lot of upside in silver. This is the wrong crowd to talk about. I admire you when you stand up and tell everybody in a room like this that everything you own is going lower.
What's the big deal?
No, look, I think there's upside, but it doesn't matter which point in the cycle you look at precious metals, you are going to go through some pain. And that's why focusing on the price is such a dangerous thing to do, because it brings your emotions into the conversation. If you're owning it for a reason, and that reason is longer term, the price.
So what percentage of your net worth is actually physical gold?
Physical gold, 35-40%, somewhere around there.
Wow.
It's about the same for me. And despite the fact that I think gold may very well go lower in the short term, I balance that off with cash, and the business I have generates cash I'm convinced that gold's going much, much higher. So I know I come across as short-term bearish, but I believe it's something that you have to own.
Doug, what percentage of your net worth is in actual physical gold?
I don't know. For many, many years, I've just bought bullion-type gold coins whenever I had a few extra bucks laying around. And they're getting hard to store. So...
Tough problem. First world problems.
First world problem, and forget about silver. I mean, you need a bin to store enough silver to be worth anything. No, I'm very bullish on...
I just love the fact when we went into your vault, you have air conditioning in your vault because you sit there and you like to count your money.
I don't know how many of you guys grew up on Uncle Scrooge comics, but I did, and he's one of the great heroes of literature. Totally ideologically sound comic character. He's very real to me, though. I'm a bull on gold. Yes, it's been going down since a peak that it hit in 2011. But I think it's bottoming. You may be right. I mean, we could have a credit collapse style deflation in which everything gets sold, including gold, to pay off debts that are mostly denominated in dollars. But barring that, I think we're bouncing along the bottom for gold.
And you believe the same with silver? And what about the silver to gold ratio, how it's kind of out of whack, relatively speaking, to the last 50 years?
Well, this is first of all, I'm not a believer in the silver to gold ratio. I mean, yes, it's true. Since from Roman times to, the modern times, it was 16 or 17 to 1. But there's no magic in it. There's no more reason for a ratio between gold and silver than there is between copper and cadmium. I mean, these things change, especially for industrial metals. So no.
Just like oil to natural gas on an energy equivalent, it's almost 6 to 1. And when it used to be priced like that, and remember 10 years ago, I got all that heat when I said fracking's changed that. There's the new normal. We saw it go up to as high as 70 to 1. So the new changes.
One thing I would point out about gold and silver, though, that most people really don't think about, it was the last major bottom, which was 2001, 2002. Gold was, say, about 250, and silver was about 450, I think, were the bottom. Do you realize that then, in 2002, both gold and silver were cheaper in real terms than they were in 1971, when gold was officially $35 an ounce and silver was $1.29. So they were real giveaway bargains. You got a huge second kick at the cat. And since then, they've only gone up about 4 times in price. And we've had a lot of inflation, which is not acknowledged in the government's numbers. I don't really trust U.S. government numbers much more than I trust Argentine government numbers. So I think they're cheap.
Now, it's good to see you still have some fans in the crowd. Especially with the publication Casey Research now, since I've left. Anyways, let's keep it moving.
Well, and I sold 80% of it, so I understand completely, Marin.
Oh, God, I love you. Porter's going to be so mad. Brent, if your theory's right, and you and I have been on the same side for a year on this one, what happens to copper prices moving forward?
So I think copper and commodities in general are going to stay under pressure. I really do. And the big reason I think that is I think that China is in a lot more trouble than a lot of people think it is. I think China is going to have a hard landing. And I think, considering that they're one of the biggest drivers of demand for copper, it's going to be very difficult for copper to do well in an environment where I think the dollar is doing well and China's doing poorly.
See, I actually am going to be publishing a report that China doesn't actually even need a hard landing for commodities to decrease significantly. We just need to see a little bit of a slowdown, because half of the world's copper is consumed by China. You look at concrete, you look at met coal, you look at all these resources. India's not picking up the pace in that, and there's no one else there. And more importantly, from the equity side, Grant, I know you're a macro guy, but when you see someone like Goldcorp drop 20% in one day, isn't that signaling something to you there where you're going, holy crap, one of the world's largest producers is in trouble here? They're nowhere near the bottom.
It doesn't signal that to me at all. It signals a vacuum of interest. It signals apathy. It signals no interest in the sector. It signals everything that, we talk about flash crashes. We keep seeing these flash crashes, and
but it wasn't a flash crash. They delivered a shitty quarter.
But let me finish my point. I think you'll find that wherever you look in the market, there are air pockets everywhere. There's a few stocks, the FANG stocks. There's a really thick bid and offer stack. These things will trade around all day long. Everywhere else, it doesn't exist. And you've got a lot of these program trading machines that when a number comes out, the algos go off and they sell them. But there isn't stacked up bids for Goldcorp. No one's sitting on the bid waiting, alligator style like you, for a lower offer in Goldcorp. They're just not there. So these things gap down, and it creates panic, and people dump them, and they think there's something more going on.
Losses.
Yeah, it just reinforces itself, and this just speaks to how thin these markets really are. The depth just isn't there, and I think the precious metal space in particular, because so many people, to your earlier point, have been suffering pain for 7 years, that they're just out, and we've had so many false dawns that people are like, I'm just going to wait until I see the market go up 25%, and then I'll jump back in. So yeah, the numbers weren't great. Were they worth a 20% haircut on the stock? Of course they weren't.
So Grant, I know you're more longer term on gold, but looking at that, if the market still goes down, what other commodities are you really excited about going, holy crap, this looks really cheap or interesting?
Well, the one name that keeps coming up when I travel around and talk to people is uranium. And it's something that really smart people who have no real experience in the commodity space are starting to get really excited about uranium for a bunch of reasons. And I think it's those signs. When you see smart investors looking at places where they don't normally look because they see opportunity, that's the time when you want to start paying attention. And Brent and I have a bunch of mutual friends in the hedge fund space who have no reason to look at uranium except the fact that they think there's a setup there now. It may not be quite there, but these guys are always early. But they see potential for really good returns in the uranium space.
Brent, what about you? What other commodities are you looking at going, geesh, I got to get more into this?
Well,
the greed factor is what I'm trying, the spider sense.
So people are going to laugh at this, but the dollar is a commodity. It is a commodity. Money's a commodity. Money's a commodity that has ascended to becoming the most marketable commodity, and therefore it's money. But it's still a commodity. And I think the dollar is going to go so much higher than anybody thinks is possible, because I think most people think that it'll go up 5 or 10%, and to Grant's point, the central banks will come rushing in and stopping it. I think that is wrong. I think it's going to go back to its all-time highs.
But I don't think Grant said 5 or 10%. When do you see the manipulation in the market?
Well, look, the problem is what Brent is saying could very well be true. This thing might spike 20%. Yeah. My point is, as soon as that happens, it's going to get crushed. So he may be right for a couple of days or a week, but it's going to get hammered down so fast because it has to be.
So I think that's wrong. And Grant's one of my favorite people in the world.
I love creating a milkshake.
But I think what happens is the flow of capital into the dollar insulates the United States. And Trump does not give a damn what anybody else thinks. He is not going to back down. And if our stock market is doing fine, and everybody else is burning to the ground, he will not care. And if Powell is raising rates and the stock market's going up, he's not going to stop either. I think people need to listen to what they've said. I mean, we have the perfect storm of dollar liquidity. And these guys are like magicians that are making dollars disappear. Tariffs and lack of trade means less dollars circulate. Raising interest rates sucks dollars out of the system. But if the money that is out there flows back to the United States and pushes asset prices higher, it allows them to keep doing it while everybody else burns. Now, eventually, we will burn as well. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying buy U.S. equities because things are good. I'm saying buy equities because that's one of the few places that the liquidity will go. So
give me 1 or 2 names that you are actively buying right now.
Last week I bought Philip Morris. I said this earlier. I think that's a great company to buy.
So you like your Vice stocks? They're going to take over the cannabis industry?
Absolutely.
Even though you got...
Listen, I worked for Philip Morris in 1997. And at the time I was working, they were considering buying a company called American Spirit Tobacco, which is a little tiny indie brand of tobacco. I think they're based in New Mexico or something. And it's a little tiny company. And I could not figure out why we were wasting our time trying to buy this company. And ultimately they did not, but I was talking to the head of M&A for Philip Morris, who was working on the deal, and he had me running some numbers. And I said, why are we doing this? And he said, because we want to control the whole industry. And I said, okay, that's fine, but you can only buy so many of these things, and you do control the whole industry. I said, what are you going to buy next? And he said, cannabis. This was 1997.
So what about now that they've, Constellation Brands has put $10 billion into the sector in Canada? Do you think they were too early, or like there's some big money competition to that theory?
I think them coming in forces.
Or is it a big enough sector?
Yeah, I think they're so big and they come in. I think it forces other people to go in. I mean, that's why when you saw the day that Tilray went up to $300 was because I think that same morning Coca-Cola came out and said they might have to, to buy something to put into their beverages or something.
Great. So you're taking caffeine and pot at the same time.
Exactly.
And not burn it down. Or God, again, Elvis would have loved that.
They know addictive industries very well.
So Doug, what about you? What are you excited about buying right now other than gold? Because your vault is full.
Well, I was a very late adopter, but not too late, to the cryptocurrency boom. And since it went parabolic before it crashed, cryptos were very, very good to me. And I actually have come to understand the value of some of these cryptos. They actually do have value, use value, which was my problem with them. So I think there's going to be a second kick at the cat. We'll see. I'm not an expert in the area.
But which one are you buying?
I mean, I don't even have a cell phone, for Christ's sake. No, we have a very smart guy that works for us named Marco Wutzer, and I let Marco do my thinking because we think very much alike, but he has a knowledge base that I don't. And I got involved in the pot space years ago, and I own 4 private pot companies right now. They seem like they're all okay, but they're not public, and I like stuff that's public. No more private deals this late in the game for me in anything. So I've been in both of these
late as
things.
in the cycle or your own personal cycle?
No, I mean, I took a big position in one that's coming out, should have been out last month, but it'll be out within a month, at a dime, and they did their last financing at $3.75. So I think I'm going to be okay on that, and you can buy a lot of stock at a dime. And I bought 3 others too, so we'll see how they. So it's been good for me, but look, I'm a perma bear. I'm skeptical of absolutely everything.
Okay, so now.
And of course, I like these mining stocks, Marin. I mean, I know that you think the commodities are going to continue going, and maybe they will, but.
Remember, an alligator likes. I'm a predator when it comes to stocking these stocks.
And I agree with your methodology totally. It's just a judgment call.
Now, Grant, you were really good on your call when it came to the election in 2016. What do you see happening is it in 5 days, the election here?
Midterms, yeah.
The midterms? Is it 6 days? Oh, sorry, I'm Canadian. I don't know the exact details.
And you could ask the only Brit on the panel what he thinks. Okay, that makes sense. Look,
I'm assuming you talked to Pippa because she was pretty spot on it last time.
People keep writing Trump off, and you can have an opinion about the way he carries himself, what he says, the way he does what he does, but he's been effective, and ultimately, that's going to be what speaks at the polls. I think the surprise will be a very strong Republican performance. I mean, people are talking about getting out the vote, and the Democrats have kind of. Circling the wagons, but I think the surprise is going to be an extremely strong turnout for the Republicans, and that's just going to strengthen Trump's agenda. It's going to strengthen his power base and give him carte blanche to keep doing what he's doing, which, to Brent's point, is down the torpedoes, full speed ahead. I'm going to keep doing what I think is right for America, and that's great for America in the short term, but it's a problem for the rest of the world. And the question is, at some point, does Trump back down? I think Brent's right. I don't think there's any back down in him.
Brent, what are you thinking for the midterms?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Grant. And, it's tough living in San Francisco. You hear the other side all the time. But I travel quite a bit, and I've probably been in 20 states since the 2016 election. I have family that lives in the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. And I'm telling you, with the exception of California and New York, I think every state I've been into, every bar you walk into, every hotel lobby, every gas station, the Fox News is on. It's not on CNBC, it's not on CNN, it's on Fox News. And whether you like Fox News or whether you think it's fake news or whether you think that's, right-wing crazy people, it doesn't matter. That's what I'm telling you. A lot of people outside of California and New York watch it, and they believe it. And so I think that is going to surprise a lot of people again.
Doug, you took 100 ounces from me on our bet.
Are we talking about pot or gold now?
That's right. I bet on.
And I want to explain the one thing about Doug Casey, because all of the odds were in my favor ahead of time, and he took a bet. I couldn't believe he did at even odds. It was 1-1, and we were teasing each other back and forth. Like, I'll tell you what, Doug, I'm a fair businessman. Give me 75 ounces, and we'll call it even. And Doug, in his classic email, no.
The only thing wrong with that bet that I made with you was I was viewing it as a gentleman's bet, even money. But I know I could have gotten 4 or 5-1 from you. But like I said, it was a gentleman's bet. So I don't know. The next bet we could make is that I think the second stage of the Greater Depression, which started in 2007. Is going to unveil itself while Trump's in office, and that's going to be big trouble. I've been watching CNN and MSNBC while I've been on the road recently, and it is absolutely amazing how much everybody on those channels really, really hates Trump and hates the in flyover country. We're on the ragged edge of a civil war. I really believe that's possible. I'm not sure if I'd make a bet on that, but this is going to be ugly. And actually, the United States should break up into several different countries. It's way too big and unmanageable. And forget about this idiotic election coming up, because as Mencken said, an election is just an advanced auction on stolen goods. And I'm really not interested in what two criminal gangs, how they're divvying up the spoils, and all these fools out there are voting for their guy, and the politicians treat them all as marks and mooches. So, to me, voting is idiocy for all kinds of different reasons. It endorses a corrupt system, a corrupt process. It needs to be flushed.
How do you really feel, Doug? So, Grant,
I toned it down for public consumption, man. I'll tell you tonight.
Grant, you're one of the few guys that travels more than me around. And what about the millennial factor? This is the first year where the millennials now are actually making up a bigger population than the boomers. And how do you see that affecting the global economy? Like, it's going to shift, right? Like, things are changing big time.
Yeah, I need a phrase book because I don't understand them. I have 2 millennial daughters. I've never understood them. And now we're at Real Vision. We have about 40 millennials working for us. I don't understand them. It's amazing. I mean, they're bright, creative people, and they are so sheltered and so misguided about the real world that at some point that's going to come back and hurt them, and it does matter, but I don't think they're engaged in the wrong things. They're not engaged in their future, which is entitlements. It's all the things that are going to matter to them when they're 30, 40, 50, 60.
But wasn't that what your dad said about you 30 years ago? Possibly,
but I didn't have an iPhone and Instagram. I didn't have distractions.
Self-absorption.
That it was superficial and really suck your attention away from the things that matter. And when you read the research on what cell phones are doing to this generation, it makes perfect sense to me. But I think they're all looking in the wrong direction for the things that matter. They're attaching themselves to every cause they can, but the one cause that they need to attach themselves, which is their own future, they're missing.
But But what matters is how many likes they got on their last photo.
Hey, look, I mean, you're someone that doesn't get many likes, so I totally understand that. But no, look, you're right. It's
Lies. I buy a lot of them. Brent, what about your take? You're much, you got less gray hair than your to either side of you. What's your take with the millennials coming into the crowd and, you're going to these bars around the country and hanging out at gas stations. So, there is a Tesla, right?
I mean,
because look at 10 cents revenue is bigger than all of the gold producers' free cash flow, payback in less than 4 months. And this thing's going to make billions and billions. It's valued at 15 billion. It's just starting. So there's a whole new market coming. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that I know a lot of times I come across as very bearish, and I do think we're going to have a couple very tough years, but there's that line from Jurassic Park, life finds a way, right? I think we are going to continue advancing, and it doesn't ever usually pay to bet against technology. It kind of advances on, and I think we have a couple tough decades ahead of us, but life will find a way, and I think this next generation, they'll figure out something that we have no clue of, whether it's digital currencies or whether we have the big burn down that he talks about and they build it back up. I don't know, but I'm actually a fairly positive guy. I'm a happy guy. I'm not, I try not to walk around with a cloud over my head, but I think you got to be a realist too, and I think the next generation has a tough inheritance that they're going to receive, but maybe that's what they need.
Sorry, I misspoke. I got things confused. I meant Fortnite has a $15 billion valuation.
This is a good story. Let me tell you a quick story. My son, who is not a dancer at all, will not stop dancing now from these Fortnite dances that they do when they win. And we were in Lake Tahoe, in the middle of Lake Tahoe, on a boat, and he stands up and he starts dancing, and another boat comes by, and the little kids jump up in that boat and start dancing back to him. So it's like this whole...
It's like hanging out with Doug Casey and these libertarians. They keep dancing to each other.
What can possibly go wrong in society?
I mean, just I don't know.
Okay, so how about a couple of questions from the crowd before we rip into something called the Katusa Crossfire? You got three really bright minds here. Yes, sir.
So I have a question for Grant. A short while ago I spoke, asked Brent. He didn't seem to think that the reason China is acquired so much gold has any monetary reason, any monetary motivation behind it. He seems to think it's just a hedge against crisis.
So the question is, why is China buying gold?
Do you have any comment on that?
I think China's buying gold for the reason that a lot of people in that part of the world are buying gold, history. They understand history, they've lived history, and I think they understand that gold is wealth, true wealth. And if you can swap your fiat dollars for real wealth, frankly, you're crazy not to. So I think there's a self-preservation element to it, but I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. I think the Chinese and the Russians are swapping their dollars for gold as fast as they possibly can, but it's partly to give them a way out of the US system, because right now they're boxed in with the SWIFT system and the dollar being the only currency. That's why if you read, you'll see all these stories about the bilateral deals that are being done between the Saudis and the Turks and the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese to build this framework where they can bypass the dollar. And Brent's good buddy Luke Gromen talks a lot about this on Twitter. If you don't follow Brent and Luke Gromen on Twitter, you need to do it just to watch the interaction between them, because it's fascinating and educational and hilarious. But there is a real move to bypass the dollar going on, and gold is at the very center of that.
I actually meant asking you about that because I'm puzzled by that relationship.
Very dysfunctional.
Yes, sir. Let's make it quick.
Grant, absolutely loved your presentation this morning about
very kind.
the
Thank you.
benefits of returning to a gold standard. Question 1, how likely is it? How soon would you see it? Question 2, what place would silver have in a future monetary gold-based system?
Well, I think when I talk about the gold standard, it's been a bimetallic standard for much of the last 5 centuries, so silver will definitely have a place in that. Do I think it's inevitable? Yes. Do I think it's imminent? No. I think gold will, as it's always been, I try to make that point in the presentation, it will be the answer at some point. Whether it's temporary or it comes back for good, I don't know. But when we have the kind of things that Doug talks about happen, the breakdown of civilization, which sounds like a crazy idea, but it's happened countless times through history, gold will be the answer. I don't know when it's going to happen. Maybe it's not even in our lifetimes, but I think when it happens, if you're not prepared for it, you're too late. And I think as Pericles said, you don't try and predict the future, prepare for it. And I think that's what you have to do.
So I got a question for Doug, actually. Doug, you know my belief is Argentina's where dreams go to die, and you love Argentina.
And where money goes to die, too.
And how many times over the last 100 years has Argentina go bankrupt? So why hasn't anyone gone to the gold standard? Because politicians, it would keep them to becoming truthful and honest. And maybe
You just
that's
answered
the
your own
answer.
question.
Well,
Exactly.
that's the answer. Interestingly,
So then-
yeah, go ahead.
No, that's my point is how long before the world will do it? It could be a few more 100 years before we see that.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing, and all the cultures in Latin America are very, very problematical. Interestingly, most people are unaware of this, that both Brazil and Argentina, who are the world's two worst offenders when it comes to destroying their currencies, and they're neck and neck in number of currencies and percentage inflation, both had gold currencies before, I think, 1931. I don't think it's going to, I was optimistic about Argentina for a while when Mauricio Macri was elected, because he's a non-Peronist, which is very unusual in Argentina, and he seems like a decent human being. But what he's done is too little, too late, and I expect he'll lose, and then they'll put in somebody, like Christina Kirchner, and the country will go in the direction of Venezuela, and I'll lose a whole bunch of money. But I don't care. The lifestyle was worth it. I mean,
I love it. And on that note, we're going to start Katusa's Crossfire.